Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. Who is this?
This is Anita. They're
Hi,
just
this
waiting.
is
It
Tom.
hasn't. Yeah. Hi, Tom. How are you? I could tell by
Hi.
your voice. Yeah, they're just waiting a couple minutes for everybody to get there. So you're in.
All right, thank you.
Now your decision whether to get vaccinated or not can be a life or death determining factor.
Of just junk.
You're like, oh, well, that's why the fire department said if it caught on fire, they won't let it in.
Yeah, although this stuff wouldn't catch on fire, but I mean, it was just like metal pieces of, I don't know, I mean, it was literally like they driving around in junk. I said, oh, it's maybe something of fire.
Molly did that for us.
Good morning. I'm Werner Tepe. I call to order the Public Service Committee of Thursday, September 23, 2021. Can we have a roll call?
Copey,
Kopi's present.
Brown,
Brown here.
Leonard,
Leonard here.
Lewis,
Louis here.
Shepro,
Shepro here.
Pepe,
Tepe here.
you have a quorum.
Okay. I have some opening comments that I would like to repeat from several months ago. It appears that we have interested parties here at our committee meeting. We welcome you. But some background and information as to our rules of order and the jurisdiction of this committee. As a committee, items that are acted on here are forwarded to other committees or to the county board for their action and approval, and are not put into effect solely based upon what we do. Several elected offices are included in our agenda and are run by elected officials. So the county clerk, county recorder, and county treasurer are all elected officials. These individuals do not report to the county board. They report to and are responsible to the voters who elected them and gave them the responsibility to handle their office and the duties of that office. These offices submit their reports through our committee, and we work in concert with them to handle and forward on any issues that may require an action by the county board. If you have questions for elected officials, you should address those issues to their offices. If you are not satisfied with their response, there are other venues you can pursue. I sincerely respect the right of voters to express their opinions and the agenda that they may want to pursue. This stands whether I personally agree with your issues or not. Accordingly, we welcome those of you who want to make public comments and have signed up to speak. Please note, however, that this is not a venue for public question and answer session. If you have questions to pose to the committee members or any of the elected officials, please feel free to contact us by email or phone or schedule an appointment to meet with us. All of our email addresses and other contact information are readily available on the county website. If you have signed up today, please note you will be limited by the rules of order to 5 minutes for matters appearing on the agenda and 3 minutes for items not appearing on the agenda. Total public comment time is limited to 30 minutes for matters appearing on the agenda. If you have any documents, please provide them to the chair, me. I will review them, and if I feel they are appropriate, I will include them with our next committee agenda. Please try to refrain from repeating any comments that were made by other speakers or at the county board meeting. Also, decorum is very important. Please refrain from any disruptive or disorderly conduct. If there is any disruptive or disorderly conduct, I will suspend the meeting while offending individuals are escorted from the premises. Thank you. So first, let's talk about, I'll entertain a motion for approval of our minutes
Leonard
from both
moves.
July and August.
Second, Shepro.
Questions, comments? Okay, roll call.
Brown,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Shepro,
Shepro, yes.
Surges. Kopi,
Copy, yes.
Tepi,
Tepe, yes.
it passes.
Okay, public comments. I have 4 people signed up for public comments. They'll be limited by time to 5 minutes. And we have a clock up there that'll be controlled. And the first person I have is Linda Prestia. Hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Yes, sir. Do I need to state my address?
Your name and address, please.
Linda Prestia. I live at 6539 Pine Hollow Road in Carpentersville. I was the campaign manager for a statewide candidate on the ballot in 2020. Noah Pratt, an election security consultant, spoke virtually earlier this year about how the 2020 election was safer, more secure, and more audited than any contest in American history. I'm here to say, no, it wasn't. Illinois was not audited and there were many problems. I can tell you a few stories from Noah Pratt's own home turf in Cook County, where he was the former director of elections. That is actually contrary to the statement he made publicly. In fact, the Kane County clerk himself showed me a book that was created documenting and logging all the calls, grievances, problems from voters related to the election of 2020. The book does exist and was FOIA'd last June, but was never received, by the way. This book alone could show that this election in Kane County was flawed and had many problems. On election day, the campaign received emails and calls from Illinoisans in Cook County, Kane, and numerous other counties complaining that they were showing up to vote, but were informed in their precincts that someone voted for them already. In Kane, keep in mind, there were no spoiled votes or provisional votes, something even a neighboring county clerk noted to me was highly suspect. One person showed the campaign I was working for a mail-in ballot he got sent to his house, a Cook County address he has lived at for 3 decades. Look at this picture. The mail-in ballot was addressed to a man with the name of Julian Blank Hernandez. This man has a voter key and a state voter ID and was in Chicago Ward 45, according to the data file. He has no birth date, no age, and no voting history, but it was registered to vote 10/3/2020. As of yesterday, he remains on the voter data file. This is only one example of the problems in Cook, a county that has not been audited, but saw a record turnout in 2020, even though it was the second highest exodus rate in the country. I find it highly suspect that Vern Tepe, the board member who didn't want to hear about anomalies in the election numbers a few months ago, even though he's a math major, now is inviting Noah Pratt from Cook County to speak in King County to preach about safe elections. Vern Tepe, in all actuality, should actually recuse himself from anything related to the election integrity issues of November 2020, because he himself was on the ballot. It's actually a conflict of interest, I believe. I looked up Noah Pratt's on the voter data file. Pratt's came out publicly as a Democrat in the 2016 election cycle. This is a searchable fact on the internet. Noah Pratt is on the data file. See this picture? But it doesn't even have his address listing where he lives in Cook County. He's just a registered voter with no traceable address. Even a highly public figure like Governor Pritzker lists his address in Cook County. Pratt's data file shows an absentee ballot request date of July 20th, 2020, and a return date of 10/27/2020. Did he live in Cook County at a legitimate address when he voted? There is no listed legit address on the data file. He voted in Lyons Precinct 31. It's certain that we need to look into this person heading up the Cook County elections now. Maybe should look into him. Since Noah Pratt cares so much about secure and fair elections, I looked very hard to find any letters he has written to the Jesse White Secretary of State's office asking for his cooperation to clean up the voter data file here in Illinois. The only things I found was Illinois Conservative Union working with Judicial Watch that actually sued to clean up the voter data file in Illinois, and we thank them for that. Another letter I actually found was the one that Noah Pratt jointly sent to the Arizona's Karen Fan, requesting her to stop the forensic audit there. That was dated April 22nd, 2021. Pratt's did not want sunlight on that Arizona election, which, by the way, will be exposed fully tomorrow, Friday, September 24th. I opted also to FOIA the new ballot track system brought to Kane by the clerk's office in October 2020 that was installed for Kane voters to get notification that their ballot was counted. Ballot Tracks literally is a Colorado located company that receives our voting data in Kane, and then they alert voters via text, phone, email that their ballot was processed. However, it also can be the perfect tool in place for Democrats or Republicans to get a heads up and track during the early voting period and gauge how many Republicans, independents, or Democrats have returned their ballots. This is great information to have before the election day if you're trying to figure out how many votes you need to harvest to backfill a race to get your guy across the finish line. Today, I am demanding that the clerk's office reconsider using this ballot tracks program in any future elections for mail-in ballots for this reason alone. In my own list given to me by the clerk's office.
Thank you. Thank you. The timer wasn't started, but you've had enough time. Thank you. Roxanne Shilka. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Good morning. My name is Roxanne Shilka. I live in Batavia and wish to speak on election integrity. I began with a partial quote from the Federalist Papers. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. In framing a government, the great difficulty lies in this. You must oblige it to control itself. Some things never change. To anyone paying attention, the 2020 elections are suspect, not only in places like Fulton or Maricopa County, but in our own beloved Kane County. Who would have guessed? We live in a very desirable area with beautiful parks, forest preserves, shopping, and restaurants. So what's wrong with this picture? It's that pesky appearance of those darn election irregularities. Do we really want to be like those counties that made national news? I don't think so. It doesn't matter if your vote by mail automated equipment is fast and efficient, if there's low security surrounding the chain of custody or dead people are voting. Let me give you a quote from Joe Biden in 2014. Corruption is a cancer that eats away at a citizen's faith in democracy. It wastes the talent of entire generations. It scares away investments and jobs, end quote. I'm assuming that that's not what you want and that you ran for these board positions because you care about this community. If that is truly the case, you must take seriously even the suspicion of questionable elections. Have every step from receiving, counting, chain of custody, open and transparent, and follow the written procedures. As public servants, you work for us, and your job is to provide oversight for fair and honest elections. In fact, your mission statement reads in part, Kane County and government is to be accountable to its citizens and providing government services in a fair, professional, and courteous manner, end quote. There are allegedly significant irregularities in our 2020 election that can't be swept under the rug or explained away. You have a duty and obligation as paid public officials to investigate this in a meaningful way and make corrections. And when making the necessary corrections for the next election cycle, don't let the fox guard the hen house. To paraphrase Edmund Burke, let's learn from history and not repeat this mistake. I leave you with a quote from Albert Einstein. The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything. Thank you.
Stephanie Maresco.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Stephanie Maresco and I live in Campton Hills. Scheduled to
Yes,
speak.
your address, please.
Oh, address, please excuse me.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that the rules do not require an address unless the person desires a response,
Oh,
only
okay.
a name.
I thought it was required. My apologies.
Sir, may I respectfully ask that the time's put back on the clock?
Of course.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you. Scheduled to speak to you today is a gentleman who is nationally known. He's risen through the ranks and he has become a spokesperson for the 2020 election and election security. When asked about election security, he shares, quote, "We've really got one major job in elections, and that's to put out results that are trusted and true." However, notice that he did not say, "It's our job to guarantee that the vote totals are accurate and legitimate." Respectfully, the wording used appears to be directly referencing public appearance rather than the actual integrity of the vote. Furthermore, it is a little surprising to read that Mr. Prates is here today to discuss with the committee post-election audits, since it was Mr. Prates himself, along with many others, to first write the Arizona Senate, asking them not to do the forensic audit. In fact, he was against it. Thus, it begs the question, is Mr. Prates really for holding audits, or is he against them? Another question that comes to mind is this: if the Kane County elections are so secure, then why have so many found anomalies with no adequate explanation as to why they occurred? In fact, on July 22nd, 2021, I submitted to the record a list of questions to this committee addressing some of the irregularities we found. Immediately upon leaving that meeting, I met Mr. John Dugan and another Kane County board member in the parking lot. In that conversation, Mr. Dugan himself asked me for a copy of the questions I submitted to this committee. He gave me his word that the county clerk's office would answer back every single question we posed in writing. And although I have emailed him to ask him to honor his word, as of today, September 23rd, we have received zero response back addressing the questions we gave him. Furthermore, the question has been raised, if our elections are so secure, then why is it necessary for Mr. Praise to be scheduled to speak here today and present about how to make elections more secure? It appears to be a contradiction. On the one hand, we are told that this is the most secure election ever, with no need to audit nor to question the county clerk's office. Yet they felt compelled to bring in a gentleman to tout election security and how they're going to be collaborating with him moving forward. Why, if there is no need? If our elections are secure, why do we need additional measures? If there is no problem with the 2020 election, then why is it necessary for us to implement this gentleman's recommendations and strategies? Mr. Prates served as the Director of Elections for Cook County and is well-versed in Illinois law, Illinois codes and policies. In his own words, he touts the fact that Illinois has paper trails. These paper trails, according to him, are seen as a measure of defense because they are, quote, paper artifacts for every single voter. Quote, within every single touch screen, there is a spooling roll, which contains a paper audit trail. In the event of a breach, we can use those paper artifacts to reestablish election results that we can put out to all of America or all of Cook County voters that they can rely upon. That is great. However, right here in Kane County, the problem still remains that the county clerk's office has denied multiple FOIA requests for a copy of these paper artifacts, also known as the tally tapes. If this is true that we can, quote, reestablish election results, then it is curious why the clerk's office has provided us only limited access to these tapes. Thank you for your time. God bless you and God bless this country.
Thank you. Robert Fighton.
Good afternoon or good morning. Thank you for letting me speak. I've been working on voter integrity nationwide since November, and I've had General Flynn as well as Linwood endorse my candidacy for U.S. Senate based on the work that I've provided them with, as well as other experts across the country. And I've been working with all the experts that are currently working on these issues across the country, such as Jovan Pulitzer, Seth Keshel, Liz Harris, et cetera. So my attention is now on Kane, and I can tell you, looking at the data, it's very disturbing, as well as the state of Illinois is even more so disturbing than Kane County. So let's talk about Kane. I was just informed that 18,000 or so votes might be being pulled out of the Aurora data set. It just so happens that as a statewide candidate, I have access to statewide data. Thank goodness, because Illinois has one of the most insane restrictive data policies with regards to voter data, so that people can't find out just how much fraud is taking place in Illinois, as well as Kane County. But fortunately, I have that right to that data as a US Senate candidate. So looking at the data in 2020 versus 2016, I noticed that there was 66,000 people or so that were registered prior to 2016, didn't show up there, but then showed up in 2020. And now there's an interesting thing about that 66,000. People are telling me, oh, your number doesn't include Aurora being added. Aurora added to Kane was about 50,000 votes. So why did 66,000 show up in 2020 that were registered prior to 2016? They weren't there. But 66,000 hit our rolls for 2020 election. And now all of a sudden I hear 16 to 18,000 might be getting pulled off. Pretty damn convenient, isn't it? So since in the past 10 years, Kane County has seen a population increase of about 16, 17,000. That's it. So why are there 189,000 people registered to vote in the past decade in Kane County? Oh, it gets better than that. Would you believe that there's about 3,100 days every 10 years if you exclude Sunday, but about 85% of the days. But meanwhile, 97.5% of all days in the past 10 years had somebody register to vote. 97.5% of the time, people are registering to vote in Kane County, including Sundays and holidays, all the time. With a 97.5% ratio, it's very suspect. So let's talk about that 189,000 real quick. 189,000 people registered, even though the population went up by 17,000. So 189 minus 17 is, maybe Vern could do some math. I don't know. 189 minus 17 is 172. So 172. So now we'll take out that 50. So now we're down to 122, 50,000 for Aurora. So 122,000. There's about 18.8% of the people in Kane County in the year 2010 census that were 18, over 5 years old, up to 18. So that's about 18.8% or so. If we look at the number of people that were registered to vote, the ratio was about 60%. So if we say, okay, 60, we'll just make it a clean 12%. 12% of 500,000 is about what? Maybe about 60,000 votes. So 60,000 votes. So 122 minus 60 is 62,000 votes that we don't know why they're there. Assuming that the same ratio held for the number of people that turned 18 registered to vote, as well as these other discrepancies, 62,000 or 20% of our voter rolls are suspect as of right now. And I got to tell you, because I'm running out of time, on one day, 2 days after Christmas, 6,346 people registered to vote, 120 Michaels, 80 Juans, okay? Now, statistically, it's off the charts that should not happen, because the number of Juans in this country falls within a specific limit, and it was 4x that number. And they were all registered 2 days later, and 75% of those records were modified less than a year later. So why are these records being created 2 days after Christmas and they're being modified 6 to 9 months later with the whole distribution? Because somebody is doing some very sinister stuff. And I have no idea if it's internally or if our systems are in fact being hacked. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Finance Department. Okay. Our treasurer.
Good morning. My name is Gary Hopp. I'm the customer service manager for the Kane County Treasurer's Office. Treasurer Kilborn asked me to fill in for him this morning. I believe you have our reports in front of you. Currently, our office is preparing for the mailing of delinquent tax bills. Those will be mailed on October 4th. We're also preparing for the tax sale that is still scheduled for November 1st. Currently, the collections for property taxes are going very well. As of this morning, we stand at 98.25% collected overall. We've never been at that point in our history. So collections have gone very well this year. I think that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Question, Copy?
Yes, Mr. Copey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had I posed this question to the treasurer on a few occasions.
Copey, could you speak up a little bit? We're having trouble hearing you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've posed this question to the treasurer on a couple occasions, and I'd just like to reiterate it with you. Exactly how many single-family taxpayer homes are there, and what percentage of the total tax is attributed to those single-family taxpayers?
I really wouldn't have access to that information.
I don't know who would.
I'm
not sure either.
Well, okay.
Mark?
The treasurer suggested that he would forward that information. Maybe we'll get that on another committee meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Supervisor of Assessments.
Good morning, Mark Armstrong, Supervisor of Assessments. My report is on pages 30 and 31 of your agenda packet. You can see that we are approaching the end of the assessment complaint cycle for filing. The final filing date for Elgin Township is tomorrow, the 24th of September. All other filing dates have passed. On the 27th, we start hearings before the Board of Review. Our hearings are going to be 100% remote, so regardless of what happens with the pandemic, we will be able to finish the tax cycle on time. It turned out to be a very good move, as we are now down a significant number of people in my own office due to a COVID outbreak there. The good news is it has been contained. There have been no additional infections for at least 10 days. The health department has been excellent to work with in making sure that we stay safe, and we're able to process everything without additional delays. Be happy to answer any questions any of the committee members have.
Thank you.
Surges. Just once again, I want to thank Mark Armstrong. I feel that the questions from constituents that come my way range from industrial users, institutional users, down to mom and pop businesses. And the questions oftentimes are larger than I can conceptualize, yet Mark always takes the time to break that down to bite-sized pieces. And while I don't always understand the complexity when you're talking millions of dollars on an industrial sized property, Mark has never, you have been gracious, sir. You have never been rude. You have never been frustrated. You have never been, and for what it's worth, I'm glad you are a member of our team, and I appreciate everything you always do. So
Thank you very much. Always happy to be here.
Thank you. Our Regional Office of Education was just passed out this nice little annual report.
Good morning. Pat Del Santo couldn't be here today, but wanted to present to you the Kane County Annual Report, and happy to leave a couple behind for those that couldn't, be here in person, that are attending virtually. Please take a moment to look at it. We'll be able to answer questions for you at the next meeting.
You might take them up to the office or we can put them in the mailboxes of
Okay.
the individual.
Wonderful, thank you. And want to talk a little bit about, we received last year the COPS federal grant. It's community oriented policing grant for, on behalf of 5 of our school districts to purchase Stop the Bleed kits, reunification kits, and comprehensive risk assessments. So we are a third of the way through that grant. We have already provided over 1,500 Stop the Bleed kits for classrooms, and are well on our way to ensuring, continuing to ensure not only safety for when they're in person, but also when we have issues like cybersecurity and then student safety related to technology, and continue to provide that training.
Okay,
That's
thank
my
you.
report.
Any questions? All right, our county clerk.
Good morning. You have a copy of our report on file. If you can see, we're definitely trending in the right direction when it comes to services being provided and revenue coming in. We've hit our 1.2 million target, and we still have a few months left. The big uptick has obviously been in terms of passports and marriage licenses. Now that more people are traveling, now that people are able to have those ceremonies in person. So we'll see that continued rise. But generally everything is seems to be going in the right direction with that. So if you have any questions on the report.
Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next is a presentation that we're going to have. So let me go through my introductory comments. As I've stated in the past, Kane County has an election system and process as good as any county in this country. Our county clerk, Jack Cunningham, and his staff do a phenomenal job in managing the process in a professional and effective way. They have equipment and procedures that ensure that our elections are fair and honest. However, recently, some groups have questioned our process. As chair of the Public Service Committee, I've been involved with many of the responses to the allegations and questions that have been raised. Election law is complicated, and in Illinois, the law frequently varies based upon the population of the county and the equipment that is used by that county. And all too often, people who have been inspired by the rhetoric about a rigged election either don't understand or don't want to hear the answers to their allegations. Today, we're having a presentation on election security and integrity by an expert in this area. Noah Prats from the election group is going to be presenting right now. All of our meetings are recorded on YouTube. So if you're interested in seeing it later or sharing it with your friends, we'll be happy to provide you with that information. Mr. Prats, thank you for coming.
Right here.
Right there.
All right.
We have.
Can you all hear me? Buttons. All right. Okay, great. Thank you, commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So my name is Noah Pritz. As you heard, I ran elections for many years in Cook County.
Microphone, please.
I don't think you're coming through the mic.
All right. Hello, hello.
Must not be on.
Hello, hello. There we go. All right. Thank you.
Please start again.
Yes, sir. So I ran elections in Cook County for 19 years. I went out to serve as a contractor to support the cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency. That's the hat as a consultant I'm wearing today. I'm delivering a portion of a talk that I give to election officials around the country post 2020. You're a different audience, but you are stakeholders nonetheless in this game. You're impacted, as are your citizenry, by the sense of security around elections. When I started in the business prior to 2020, this was a logistics game. I call it the wedding planner era of elections. We had elections on one day. We brought a bunch of people and materials to a polling place, had a little party, signed the slips at the end of the night, and it was over. Bush v. Gore era, ushered in a new era with new technologies, $3.5 billion. Election officials had to become not just logistics managers, but they had to become IT managers. They had to become legal compliance managers. And then in 2016, after the successful incursion into the statewide voter registration database in our state, election officials had to become cybersecurity managers. And as mis and dis and malinformation has flown around, election officials increasingly have to become communications professionals so they can ensure that their public, whether supporting candidates that won or lost, come along trusting the security and accuracy of the elections. And so as election officials and offices, those boards that fund them and support them around the country try to help them mature quickly to meet this moment, you know, it's important to think about what some tactics might be, some strategies for increasing and building trust through secure practices. Okay, so CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, our job is not to put any hands on keyboards to secure elections. That's done at the local level, run by the state as set forth in the Constitution. It's the way it should be. What we do is bring a set of cyber and protective security skills to serve as force augmentation for election officials. As we look out at the risk environment for election officials, we see four major buckets: cyber risks, physical risks, mis, dis, and malinformation risks, and operational risks. Cyber, we've been talking a lot about since 2016 with the recognition that all digital tools have vulnerabilities. The modern era requires their use for accuracy, but we need to make sure we've got the processes and investments in place to ensure that the systems we rely upon are in fact secure. The physical risks we've understood since the beginning of time, locks and keys and chain of custody. The newest challenge, I think, for election officials is mis, dis, and malinformation. And then there's the issue of simple operational risks. These are very complex activities with election day, vote by mail, early voting, registration through a lot of different streams. We rely on a handful of staff, usually bring in a bunch of temps, hire people for one day on election day, and expect perfect execution. Mistakes, minor, correctable, happen all the time, but the ability to buckle down and decrease the incidence of those types of mistakes are present. That will help manage the information flow if we limit mistakes. So there's some great news out of 2020. Election officials across this country conducted a very successful and secure election under unprecedented circumstances. The challenges they faced in turning on a dime to support major changes in demand was amazing. The ability to bring in new technologies, to move out to new warehouses, to handle significant changes in voter behavior, and to do so without major effect was very, very good. State and local election officials who are closest to the community, who work in the offices in the counties, who go to churches, you know, who are in fellowship with the voters, they did a great job and they remain a trusted source of information. It leaves election officials with the ability to communicate to people who may be suspect of the results. And that's the new burden or responsibility that I think many of them have. Also good news, DHS, CISA, DOJ, FBI, as well as the entire intelligence community says absolutely no evidence of any foreign government affiliated actor preventing voting, changing votes, having any effect on the counting or the processing of elections. That's good news. It's a testament to work done, I think, broadly across the community over the last 4 years, investments that counties have made on behalf of their election officials and their county clerks in this state to secure their systems. The pandemic obviously had tremendous impacts. For our part, at CISA, we worked with our federal partners, the EAC, federal voting assistance program, the Postal Service, to fast track information gathering. There are 8,800 local election bodies across the country, 104 here in Illinois, each of whom we're wrestling with the challenges of providing a safe voting environment and wrestling with changes to voter demand. We use convening power to try and fast track and get out that information. This was only possible because of the information sharing pathways that we developed since the exfiltration of data in 2016. And we're able to use it to good use to support the election community this year. However, there is some very bad news out of 2020. I mean, there's unprecedented levels of mis, dis, and malinformation swirling around our elections. Now, much of it's created or amplified by foreign threat actors. Russia and Iran in particular engaged in influence operations aimed in part at undermining threat in US elections. And you can see why they might have geopolitical goals in reducing the confidence in our form of government, the legitimacy of our leaders over time, and all the institutions that step on top of it. That, coupled with isolated errors, poorly understood processes, really can add to confusion. And so this is a place where election officials have opportunities to ensure transparency and accessibility for the voters all across the spectrum.
What does MDM stand for?
Oh, mis, dis, and malinformation. And I'll break that down in just a second. It's also important point out to election officials that there is a heightened threat of domestic violent extremists. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence and recently the FBI are highlighting concerns with domestic violent extremists and manifesting itself as frustration and threats, targets against government actors, government buildings, election officials in particular. One of the hard parts is one of the drivers, we've got major socio-political developments in our country, but one of the drivers of the DVEs, domestic violent extremists, according to the Director of National Intelligence, is narratives around fraud in the recent election. And so we highlight to election officials that the Department of Justice has a task force government-wide that we ask them to report when they get threats. That's not as relevant, I don't imagine, to you all. So if there are two virtues in elections, truth and trust, truth is probably the easier one. It's binary. Things are, they are or they aren't. A ballot is marked or it's not. It's counted correctly or it's not. A voter is registered according to the laws of the state or not. Trust, on the other hand, exists on a spectrum, and it's the sense of which our public appreciates the degree to which our public officials follow the laws of the state and execute according to the to the public policy behind those laws. And so if truth is easier, trust, we can see from around the country, has a significant deficit, but we're not powerless in that space. So MDM is three things, and generally it's the idea of misinformation, or you hear it classified as disinformation. But misinformation is a specific part of the triad that's basically information that's false but wasn't created with the purpose of causing harm. So you could imagine in a county like this, maybe one of your villages decides to send the list of voting locations to all of the voters on their email list, but it's wrong. Okay, so that's misinformation. Okay, it's damaging. They say, oops, I'm sorry. The clerk says that's wrong. I'll fix it. Okay, disinformation is information that's false, but it's sent out intentionally to harm a group or an organization. So you could think about somebody sending out, getting access to a list of voters in Kane County and sending out all the wrong polling places. And that's disinformation. It's more nefarious. On that one, election officials, supporting stakeholders, government say, no, that's wrong, here's the right list. Malinformation is the one that's most tricky. And that's where the information is based on reality, but is used to create harm. So think about the county accidentally putting the wrong list of voting locations on their polling site. Okay, and then they say, oops, I'm sorry, I'm gonna correct that. But other groups say, look, that's evidence right there. They're suppressing the vote, or they're trying to rig this thing. And then the election officials are in the place of having to describe a narrative of how the error happened, what the impacts were, what the corrective action is. And a lot of what we see around the country is sort of falls into this malinformation where, yes, there was a mistake. Yes, this complexity was overwhelmed, a poll worker or a staffer, but it was not nefarious. It was correctable. It's always been corrected. This isn't new to the elections process, but to the extent that like stakeholders are engaged, democracy is alive and well. There is, I believe, a responsibility for election officials to step up their communications game to make sure that there are that this information that's out there can be appropriately contextualized, because there's nothing more important than having all of our stakeholders believing in the sanctity of our elections. So while we can't stop MDM, there are, I mean, it's out there, and much of it comes from people of goodwill who are concerned and suspect. We can mitigate its impact by filling voids in communication or telling our story of why elections are trustworthy and true. And so there are opportunities to increase transparency and communication around the process. So briefly, I mean, CISA helps election officials around the country by providing services, you know, scanning websites, running penetration tests, identify vulnerabilities that can be potentially exploited so that election officials can come to their funding body and say, hey, please invest here, help us buy down our risks. But we walk around facilities like this. I know you guys probably work with DHS in the area, and they say, you know, a camera here would be great and a swipe card access would be there. That's our role in helping election officials increase the actual security of their systems. But election officials carry most of the brunt. They got to help themselves. I phrase this out in the idea of 3 T's. Okay, so truth and trust are the virtues. The 3 T's are the ones that are the actions that can back up or support those virtues of elections: tracking, testing, and telling your story. Tracking is simply creating documentation that details how things should be done, how they are being done. Testing is simply verifying and audit the work of staff and the functioning of election equipment and software. And telling the story is getting out ahead and convincing the voters why elections are trustworthy. Keeping your ear to the ground about likely stories when there are confusing incidents, get out in front of that. The ability to use the evidence you create through tracking and testing to tell that story really empowers election officials whenever there's confusion or suspicion. And so just briefly, I mean, to manage the risk, tracking is important. This is the idea of tracking ballots, equipment, election assets through robust chain of custody and physical security procedures. This reduces the risk of malicious actors, insiders gaining access to systems, or that they would do so without being detected. Effective tracking also enables good post-election tabulation audits. Now, this state does a 5% retabulation audit. It's also got a 25%. If elections are close, you can go to court if you've got a colorable case to make. Increasingly around the country, there are things called risk limiting audits, and what that does is it sets your sample size based on the degree of difference in contests. And if you find any error, that sample size grows up to the point where you could seemingly recount an entire election by hand to ensure that the software identified. And that's increasingly the best practice around the country. But to do these audits effectively, tracking your materials in and out are pretty important. So testing, the second of the 3 T's. Testing voting equipment and other assets help election officials manage risk. I mean, prior to election, pre-election, logic and accuracy testing, hash testing ensures that the software being relied upon for unofficial results are accurate. You're using the trusted build that was certified by the federal government at the AC or the State Board of Elections. You're ensuring before you put it out into production, before you give it to voters, that the equipment is operating as expected. But additional tests throughout your office, running compliance audits against your standard operating procedures are important to ensure that, we can build the best plan. We can say we're going to have a lock and a swipe card and people are going to sign in. But if people don't abide by their own policies, it's not as effective. So the goal here in increasing our internal testing regimen is to make sure that most of our security controls are followed up on with the compliance audits. And finally, telling the story. I think election officials have relied upon stakeholders. It's bipartisan in every state to different degrees when managed, when processing vote by mail ballots. And the stakeholders tend to come back year over year over year. Muscle memory is built. We're in an era of change, so there's not a lot of muscle memory. There are new stakeholders who are involved. There are opportunities to make elections much more understandable and not just rely upon goodwill that's been built up over years. And in fact, it's probably a responsibility to think about ways to communicate with all stakeholders why it's trustworthy. Opportunities to bring folks in, walk them through, do everything we can to reduce suspicion or confusion around our business. There are a lot of opportunities to do that are cheap and inexpensive. Obviously, when you're working internal with stakeholders, but there's an affirmative duty also when communicating to the public why elections are trustworthy. Anyway, that's the gist of the talk that we give to election officials as they work to continue to bolster trust in this fundamental and foundational institution. And I very much appreciate the opportunity to talk to this group, as you guys have a significant stake in elections and supporting election officials, specifically your county clerk, as he works to manage elections in these times. So appreciate you very much.
Thank you. Will you stay for a few questions?
From Commissioner? Sure.
Yes. Mr. Surges.
These aren't pointed directly at you, Noah, but they will. First off, my foundation statement is that I personally have an issue with mail-in voting, especially the ones that come in after the election cycle. I have been more than vocal about that. I have received answers, very, very specific answers. The fact of the matter is, I just don't like the answers. It's not that they're not accurate. It's just that the system is flawed. We have played within the rules. I would like to change those rules. I don't think they are appropriate or up to date, and I want to be candid at that. This nice lady, is it Stephanie? When you refer to you met in the parking lot with a commissioner and somebody from the election office, I was that commissioner. And if somebody told you that they would have information to you and didn't, I wish you would reach out to me so that I could say, but you said we would have that. Because if somebody above that individual said, don't answer that, then I would like to know why, and again, maybe there's a very legitimate reason, but don't say you're going to do something and then not do it. So I want to acknowledge to you that there was nothing at my end, and I'm more than happy to help get those answers, but in a very polite and, positive way, and happy to work with you on that. I do have a couple of questions that were sent in. Some of them are pertinent. Some of them are just, I don't understand this. And I'm trying to. It seems like in 2020, Cook County felt it was advisable or necessary to initial all of the vote by mail ballots.
I don't work for Cook County. I can't.
Any clue what that, I mean,
Carry any
because the
water.
vote by mail stuff is the stuff that I'm most interested in, like deadlines and stuff like that. Like if the election is on Monday and you still have 2 weeks in and stuff is still trickling, wait a minute. I mean, that's.
Yeah, certainly wearing my CISA contractor hat. That's not a place that I'll wade into. And I haven't touched
I appreciate it.
Cook County in years. So
my other two questions do seem and they came to me from constituents. I don't understand the term provisional ballots. And I seek a better understanding of that. Election day registration, provisional balloting, mail-in stuff. I don't understand spoiled ballots. I don't know what those concept means. There's conjectures. Well, duh. Well, no, I would like to know specifically what a spoiled ballot means. That I'm told that we didn't have any spoiled ballots in Kane County, yet other counties did. I don't know what that means. I'm not throwing stones. I'm asking a really legit question. How could we not have any, but other people did? And I don't know what that means.
So certainly I not any visibility on the facts here, but I will take that as an opportunity to say these are the exact kind of fair questions that can be answered in a well-written FAQ. Like there's messaging that you might give kind of top line to give narratives. Then you can really get into the weeds for individuals or additional questions or concerns. And so I know election officials are working really hard across the country to build things like frequently asked questions put on the website so that people who want more information can get it in a clear and concise and accurate way from their election official. I can't speak at all to those specific questions here.
No, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question about, I'll say, misinformation or malinformation and the best way to respond to it. We had a speaker this morning that, in my opinion, tried to compare numbers that were like oranges and apples. Okay, for example, there was an undercount by the Census Bureau of 18,000 people or an apparent undercount of some 18,000 people in Aurora. And it appeared to me that individual said those people are being removed from the voting rolls, which they don't interconnect. It is so far from the truth that it's kind of unrealistic to even discuss. So how do you handle some of the responses to the mis and malinformation that people seem to bring up?
Sure. So I always tried to start with, to the best of my ability, the assumption of good faith and goodwill. And obviously, the people here assembled care very deeply about this country and their elections. And I do, while I could easily get to the point of, as an elected official or an election official, of being frustrated, I do think that all time spent engaging with stakeholders to ensure that there isn't confusion and to answer questions is well spent. And it is going to be a time investment. It is going to be an investment in communications and stakeholder engagement. But we're at a point in our country right now where we are fellow Americans who are split. But I believe that overwhelmingly we're of good faith and goodwill and can be convinced. And spending the time to do that convincing is true. Now, I think that's absolutely true, at most levels. And I think that's the level we're engaging at, which is retail democracy.
Thank you. And Mr. Surges, I think many of the questions that you brought up were answered in the presentation 2 months ago that Mr. Pollack did. So it might be helpful to review that. Some of them were fairly detailed, particularly that about provisional ballots. And I can't remember whether it was whether it was Jack Cunningham or Brian that answered it, but they did answer that question as to why it occurred here in Kane County. So,
Chairman Tepe, you're not the first person to tell me I'm a little slow. Sometimes I do need it repeated a couple of times
Question,
and
Toby?
different variables, and I'll go home and constituents or my wife will ask me a question and I thought I understood it clearly and yet I don't. So, and again, sometimes you get the answer and I am admitting I just don't like the answer. And that takes a little bit to process through and give me points for being very candid and open about those things. And I just need to work my way through it. So,
well, I'll take some advice from your wife and try to repeat things as often as I can to you. Okay, thank you very much.
Appreciate you.
Yes, Mr. Copey, hold on. Mr. Copey?
Hi, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Mr. Pratt, for coming. You've, in my opinion, have reiterated a lot of the concerns that the constituency is coming forth with, and but it doesn't directly answer the questions. And as Mr. Tepe had suggested, those questions need to be directed to the clerk, and I agree with that to a high degree. But at the end of the day, this committee, and I'm speaking to the committee members, and, that this committee is technically the oversight for the clerk, so it wouldn't be unordinary for us to consider or discuss some changes. One of the changes that I think would clear up a lot of consternation in regards to chain of custody is the idea that there could be some video monitoring placed at strategic locations, not limited to the polling places perhaps, but also the actual counting procedures and the vetting of signatures, and these archives should be available for within the realm of chain of custody. That definition of chain of custody would probably have to be defined or altered to include that type of activity. We are in a new paradigm as far as information and the ability or the necessity to use this technology on behalf of the people, because the people are just taxed for time. There is no time. The working class people are working too hard. They're working two family members, and sometimes two family members working two jobs, and just to pay the taxes. And if we could simplify that and allow these people to have access to a monitored system, I think that would solve a huge gap in the suspicion that this is going on or that's going on or that's not being considered, or were there really election judges? Where did the signature? Blah blah. All that stuff can be answered simply with a video monitor. Would you advocate that type of a situation, sir?
So, I mean, again, I will tell you that a good many election officials around the country utilize similar technology to live stream their ballot processing. I mean, you'll see it in places like in Washington or Denver, and it's at various levels of detail, right? You're probably not putting signature images or other PII on screen for the public. But given the information flow, this also has to be, I would say, curated in a way or contextualized, because just raw footage allows sort of more data points to be misinterpreted. So I'm picturing like there were things coming out of November's election where people think they saw something in a vote counting center that wasn't what people said it was. And so that's because it's raw data with no contextualization. So yes, I think you want to make this as accessible to as many people as possible, but also recognizing that it's difficult and requires context. So that's what I'll say. Some very high performing election offices do live stream significant portions of their like back office mail ballot counting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Prates. Moving on, I have no reason for executive session. May I have unanimous consent to replace reports on file? Okay. And I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Mr. Kenyon, you may,
I'm not a member of the.
you may.
Surge's motions.
I'm second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Have a good day.